73 seconds. That's how long it took for NASA's arrogance to kill 7 astronauts on live television. What you know about Challenger is a carefully constructed lie. Today on Rootvolutionary, we expose the suppressed evidence, the engineers' warnings they ignored, and the horrifying truth about what really happened inside that falling crew cabin. 11:39 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. The countdown reaches 0. 11:40:13. The world changes forever. In those 73 seconds, Space Shuttle Challenger doesn't just explode, it detonates America's blind faith in NASA. The fireball is seared into national memory. The death of teacher Krista McAuliffe becomes our collective trauma. But behind the official story lies something far darker, a web of ignored warnings, political pressure, and disturbing evidence they've spent decades burying. NASA received explicit warnings to scrub the launch. Engineers mapped out the exact failure sequence in chilling detail and were ordered to stand down. Classified documents suggest the crew may have survived the initial explosion. And in a surreal twist, a beloved children's television character was nearly aboard. This isn't another respectful documentary. This is Rootvolutionary's investigation into 8 censored truths about Challenger. Why NASA was willing to sacrifice lives to send a schoolteacher and almost Big Bird into space. How Morton Thiokol engineers predicted the disaster down to the second. What the recovered cockpit recordings reveal about the crew's final minutes. The White House's suspicious timing of the launch on Apollo 1's anniversary. Smash that subscribe button. What comes next will change how you view space exploration forever. Originally constructed in 1975 as a test airframe, STA-099, Challenger wasn't converted to flight status until 1979. Its April 1983 maiden voyage, STS-6, made history by conducting the program's first spacewalk. But it was the doomed STS-51L mission that would define its legacy. The orbiter carried barrier breakers, Sally Ride, America's first female astronaut, and Guion Bluford, the first African-American in space. But the mission's public face was 37-year-old Krista McAuliffe, a social studies teacher from New Hampshire, selected from over 11,000 applicants for NASA's Teacher in Space program. McAuliffe's presence transformed this into the most publicized shuttle launch ever. NASA arranged live satellite feeds to schools across America, ensuring countless children, including McAuliffe's own students, witnessed the catastrophe in real time. Yet McAuliffe wasn't the only educational payload considered. Declassified documents reveal NASA negotiated with Children's Television Workshop to fly Sesame Street's Big Bird. They even conducted suit-fit tests with performer Carol Spinney before flight directors vetoed the plan, a fact NASA quietly confirmed in 2015. Pilot Michael J. Smith's final utterance, "Uh-oh," captured on the orbiter's voice recorder, proves at least one astronaut recognized the unfolding catastrophe. But the true crime occurred the night before launch, when Morton Thiokol engineers made their desperate, last-minute appeal. During an emergency teleconference, Thiokol's team presented irrefutable data, showing the rubber O-rings would likely fail in the unprecedented cold. Engineer Roger Boisjoli famously slid a memo across the table, reading, "Help us stop this launch." NASA managers overruled them. Bob Ebling, one of the protesting engineers, returned home that night and told his wife, "It's going to blow up." Decades later, he would tell NPR, NASA had their minds made up. They needed this publicity stunt. Consequences, be damned. The morning of January 28th broke at a record low 18 degrees Fahrenheit, minus 8 degrees Celsius, 15 degrees colder than any previous launch. As Challenger ascended, the right solid rocket booster's O-rings indeed failed as predicted. Superheated gases breached the seal, then burned through the attachment strut connecting the booster to the external fuel tank. At 46,000 feet, the structural failure created a deadly mixture of liquid hydrogen and oxygen. The resulting explosion produced a fireball visible for miles, but the crew cabin, remarkably intact, continued upward for several more seconds before beginning its horrific 3-minute plunge to the Atlantic. While NASA immediately claimed the astronauts died painlessly, investigative reporting by the Miami Herald uncovered disturbing evidence. The crew compartment showed signs of emergency oxygen activation, proving some astronauts were conscious after the breakup. The official cause of death was listed as blunt force trauma upon ocean impact. This tragedy occurred exactly 19 years after the Apollo 1 fire, a grim anniversary NASA somehow overlooked in their launch scheduling. President Reagan postponed his State of the Union address, instead delivering what historians consider his most moving speech, honoring the crew's sacrifice.
Report on the State of the Union. The events of earlier today have led me to change those plans. Today is a day for mourning and remembering. Nancy and I are pained to the core by the tragedy of the Shuttle Challenger. We know we share this pain with all of the people of our country. This is truly a national loss. 19 years ago, almost to the day, we lost 3 astronauts in a terrible accident on the ground. But we've never lost an astronaut in flight. We've never had a tragedy like this. And perhaps we've forgotten the courage it took for the crew of the shuttle. But they, the Challenger 7, were aware of the dangers, but overcame them and did their jobs brilliantly. We mourn 7 heroes: Michael Smith, Dick Scobie, Judith Resnick, Ronald McNair, Ellison Onizuka, Gregory Jarvis, and Krista McCullough. We mourn their loss as a nation together.
Salvage operations lasted months. Navy divers finally located the crew compartment on March 7, 1986, resting 100 feet below the surface. Forensic analysis revealed 3 of the emergency air packs had been manually activated, a detail omitted from NASA's official reports. The Rogers Commission's investigation exposed systemic failures. Thiokol engineers had provided 13 separate warnings about cold weather risks. Launch commit criteria explicitly prohibited launches below 53 degrees Fahrenheit or 12 degrees Celsius. NASA management overruled safety concerns to maintain their 24-flight per year schedule. Former NASA chief scientist Richard Feynman famously demonstrated the O-ring failure during a televised hearing, dropping a piece of the material into ice water to show how it lost elasticity.
Put it in ice water. And I discovered that when you put some pressure on it for a while and then undo it, it maintains, it doesn't stretch back, it stays the same.
His scathing assessment. For a successful technology, reality must take precedence over public relations, for nature cannot be fooled. The shuttle program stood down for nearly 3 years, while NASA implemented safety changes. Yet, as the 2003 Columbia disaster would prove, the underlying cultural problems persisted. Challenger debris continued washing ashore for years, with large fragments discovered as late as December 1996. Krista McAuliffe's death created a 22-year moratorium on civilian spaceflight. Her backup, Barbara Morgan, finally reached orbit in 2007 aboard Endeavour, a bittersweet fulfillment of the Teacher in Space mission. Among the recovered personal effects was astronaut Ellison Onizuka's daughter's soccer ball, miraculously intact. In 2017, astronaut Shane Kimbrough carried it to the International Space Station, a poignant memorial to what was lost. The unanswered questions. Why did NASA Administrator James Beggs insist the launch proceed despite 11th-hour warnings? What did the cockpit voice recorder reveal that remains classified? How much did Cold War politics influence the rush to launch? Why has NASA never fully acknowledged the crew likely survived until impact? The technical fixes were implemented, but the institutional arrogance remained. As private companies now push toward Mars, Challenger's ghost whispers an urgent warning. Those who fail to learn from history. If this investigation made you question everything NASA claims to stand for, hit like and subscribe to Rootvolutionary. We're just getting started.